coffee on the outer Helm was famously terrible. It was a running joke among the 70,000 souls aboard. Today, however, you would have paid a fortune for one sip. Your watch had been quiet, agonizingly so. You traced patterns on your console screen, stared into the endless, silent dark. The silence was the point. The Helm was humanity's lonely sentinel. It watched a star lane no one had used in centuries. Then a sound shattered the quiet. Not a whisper, but a scream. A full station klaxon, a sound reserved for nightmares. Red light washed over your console, bathing everything in blood. Your heart hammered against your ribs. You looked up at the main view screen, your breath caught in your throat. They were simply there, a fleet, not a patrol or a scout ship, dozens of them. They hung in the void like obsidian daggers. Their shapes were wrong, all sharp angles and aggressive lines. No drive signatures, no entry from faster-than-light travel. They just appeared, a magic trick performed by a demon. The quiet was gone. Something much worse had taken its place. They did not hail you. There were no diplomatic channels opened, no offers of friendship or stern warnings. You watched your comms panel. It remained stubbornly, terrifyingly silent. The captain's voice cut through the alarm. Try all frequencies. Standard first contact protocols. Now you did. You sent out greetings in every known language. You broadcasted math, music, and maps of the human heart. The only reply was fire. Thin lances of angry, white energy. They crossed the void in an instant. The station shuddered around you. A deep, groaning sound of stressed metal. The shields flared, turning from invisible to a brilliant, shimmering blue. They were holding. For now. You looked at the enemy fleet. Their weapons spoke a single, universal language. It was a language of pure destruction. The station rocked again. Another volley. Another groan from the superstructure. On the bridge, people were shouting. Damage reports flooded the network. You tuned it all out. Your job was data. And in the middle of this chaos, you had to focus on the numbers. You stared at the enemy energy signatures. They were overwhelming. They were impossible. They were also flawed. You zoomed in on the data stream, your screen filled with cascading code. There, between the massive power spikes, you saw it. A flicker. A tiny, almost imperceptible dip in their output. It happened a split second before each volley. A power fluctuation so small it was almost statistical noise. But it was there, and it was consistent. In the middle of annihilation, you found a pattern. It was a flaw in the void itself. It was hope. You left your station without a word. You ran. Corridors flashed by in a blur of red alert lights. You didn't slow down until you burst onto the bridge. All heads turned. The captain, a woman forged from steel and patience, fixed you with a hard stare. This had better be important, analyst. You pointed a trembling finger at the main screen. It is, ma'am. They have a weakness. You brought your findings up on her display. You showed her the energy dip, the fractional second of vulnerability. Their weapons draw too much power, you said. Right before they fire, their shields weaken. Just for a moment. A tactical officer scoffed. It's a sensor ghost, a phantom. But the captain was silent. She stared at the data. She saw the pattern you saw. She looked at the enemy fleet, then back at you. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the entire bridge. Tell me your idea. Your plan was not just desperate. It was clinically insane. You proposed to reroute the station's entire power supply. Every light, every non-essential system, every replicator that made the terrible coffee. All of it would be channeled into the main defensive cannon, One shot, a single, perfectly timed beam, an all-or-nothing gamble on a flicker of data. The captain gave the order. A strange energy filled the station. Not fear, but purpose. The quiet watch was over. The siege had begun. Engineers began pulling up floor panels. They worked in corridors, still shaking from enemy fire. Technicians furiously rewrote power grid protocols. Every single crew member had a job. Hope was being forged from scrap metal and sheer nerve. The Helm was no longer a sentinel. It was a weapon waiting to be fired. The plan needed a key ingredient. The enemy flagship had to be in the perfect position. It was the largest ship, the one coordinating the attack. It needed to be lured into the crosshairs. That job required a small, fast ship. A ship that could dance through a firestorm. Your ship. You were not a pilot, but you knew the data. You knew the enemy's firing rhythm better than anyone. You strapped yourself into the cockpit of the shuttle. It was a tiny vessel named the Longshot. Someone had a sense of humor. Through the canopy, you saw the station, your home. It looked like a wounded beast, and then you looked forward. You saw the enemy fleet. You pushed the throttle forward. The ship surged into the darkness. You were the bait, and you were flying into the mouth of the great beast. You flew like a madman. Jinking left, diving right. White-hot energy lances missed your ship by mere meters. Your console screamed with proximity alerts. You ignored them. You had one focus, the enemy flagship. It was ponderous, arrogant. It saw your tiny ship as an annoyance. It turned its massive bulk to swat you from the sky. It was working. The flagship was slowly, surely, moving into position. You were a gnat leading a monster on a string. Every instinct screamed at you to flee, to run back to the safety of the station. But you held your course. You danced and you dodged. Closer, just a little closer. The tactical grid in your cockpit glowed green. The target was in the kill box. You opened your communications. Your voice was hoarse. Now, fire now. A light brighter than a sun erupted from the station. It was not a beam. It was a solid pillar of pure energy. It crossed the void and struck the enemy flagship. The giant vessel convulsed. Its lights flickered and died. A secondary explosion blossomed from its midsection. It was a beautiful, terrible sight. A cheer went up through the station's comms network. A raw, primal scream of defiance. The flagship was crippled. It drifted helplessly, venting atmosphere. Its weapons went silent. You had done it. You had landed a blow against a giant. The celebration, however, was short-lived. The victory was a fleeting moment, because the enemy was not a mindless beast. It was intelligent, and it learned very, very quickly. You watched in horror from your cockpit. The remaining enemy ships did not flee. They did not fall into chaos. They reacted with chilling precision. Their formation shifted instantly. Smaller ships moved to shield their wounded leader. They created an interlocking wall of armor and energy. Your perfect shot had worked once. It would never work again. Then, their attack pattern changed. The rhythmic volleys stopped. They began firing at random intervals, from different ships. They analyzed your tactic. They understood the power fluctuation, and they had eliminated it. The tiny flaw you had discovered was gone. The brief, shining advantage you had earned was erased. The enemy was adapting, and the fight was far from over. The battle became a relentless, grinding siege. There were no more brilliant tactics, no more desperate gambles. There was only attrition. They pounded the station's shields with cold, methodical efficiency. The jolts became a constant rhythm of life. The lights flickered. The air grew stale. It was a war of resources. And yours were dwindling. Days blurred into one another. You barely slept. You lived on stale nutrient paste and that same terrible coffee. Hope was a currency you could no longer afford. The initial fire of defiance had burned down to embers. All that was left was grim determination. You did your job. Everyone did. You held the line. But you all knew. The line was getting thinner every single hour. Then something impossible happened. In the storm of enemy jamming, a signal broke through. It was weak, faint. It wasn't a military channel. It wasn't a distress call from some forgotten outpost. It was music. A clear, high voice. A child singing a simple lullaby. The song was old, from a colony world on the far side of the galaxy. It was a message in a bottle, cast across the stars years ago. It played over the station's internal comms. For a moment, the war stopped. On the bridge, hardened officers stood frozen. In the med bay, wounded crew turned their heads to listen. The song was a ghost, a memory of a time of peace, a reminder of the quiet homes and distant worlds you were all fighting for. It was the most beautiful and painful sound you had ever heard. As the last note of the song faded, a new signal cut through. This one was strong, deliberate. It was the enemy. A voice filled the bridge. It was ancient and cold, like the space between galaxies. It did not speak a language you knew, but the universal translator rendered it with perfect, chilling clarity. "I am the Elder Ones," the voice said. It was the commander of the enemy fleet. "Your existence is an error," the voice continued. The words felt heavy, like stones. "Your defiance is noted, but it is futile." The view screen changed. It showed your home star, Sol, a brilliant yellow sun. Then, a simulation played out. A dark weapon firing, the star shuddering, its light turning a sick, dying red. "Surrender now. Your species will be erased with minimal pain. If you refuse, we will extinguish your star." The choice was simple. Surrender your future or have your past, present, and future burned away. The bridge was silent. The threat hung in the air, heavier than any physical blow. To destroy a star. It was the power of a god. A dark, hateful god. Panic began to bubble under the surface. You could see it in the eyes of the crew. The captain's face was unreadable. She looked at the tactical display. She looked at the image of your dying son. Then her eyes found you. She did not ask for a tactical analysis. She did not ask for another clever trick. She asked you, the analyst who started this whole mess. Her look was simple. What do we do? You thought of the siege, the dwindling hope, and then you thought of the child's song, a ghost of humanity, singing across the void. You looked at the captain. You did not need words. Your answer was in your eyes. "We fight." The captain nodded slowly. She turned to her tactical officer. Her voice did not tremble. It was the voice of humanity's final, unspoken answer. "Fire," she said. "Fire everything we have left." The station's guns provided the only reply the enemy would ever get. It was a storm of iron and light. Every remaining missile launched from its tube. Every gun turret swiveled and fired until its barrels glowed red. You threw everything you had at them. The last of your strength. The last of your hope. The enemy fleet met your charge with its own. The space between you and them became a solid wall of explosions. It was the final wave. You knew it. They knew it. The station's shields, battered and weak, finally failed. They shattered into a cascade of light, like broken glass. The enemy fire began to tear into the station's hull. Metals screamed. Explosions rocked the bridge, throwing people from their feet. The lights went out, replaced by the emergency red glow. This was the last stand. You were fighting against the coming of an endless night. Then came the alarm you had been dreading, the sound of ultimate failure. A synthesized voice, calm in the chaos, announced it. Warning. Hull breach detected in Sector Gamma. Life support failing. They were on the station. The fight was no longer in the cold of space. It was inside, in the corridors, in your home. The captain drew her sidearm. "They are not taking this station," she said. Her voice was a low growl. "Arm yourselves. We hold the line here." You grabbed a pulse rifle from the emergency locker. Its weight was unfamiliar in your hands. You were an analyst, not a soldier. But that did not matter now. Everyone was a soldier. You joined the others at the bridge doorway. You could hear them coming, the heavy tramp of armored boots, the alien chatter of the invaders. The fight for the outer Helm had come down to this single hallway. To you. The enemy appeared at the end of the corridor, and you opened fire. The fighting was brutal and close. It was a blur of shouting, energy blasts, and the smell of ozone. You fought with a desperation you never knew you possessed. You fought for the memory of a child's song. You fought for the light of a distant star. One by one, the invaders fell. One by one, your crewmates fell beside you. Finally, you stood over the last enemy soldier. You fired one final shot. And then, silence. The silence that followed was absolute. It was deeper than the quiet of your long watch. It pressed in on you, heavy and complete. You stood there, breathing heavily. The battle was over. Slowly, you walked back to the bridge. The main view screen was still active. It showed the space where the enemy fleet had been. Now, there was only drifting wreckage. Twisted metal glowing faintly in the starlight. You had won. You looked around the bridge. At the smoke. At the scorch marks on the walls. At the empty chairs. The cost was written everywhere you looked. Victory did not feel like a cheer. It felt like a deep, hollow ache. You had held the line. Humanity would survive. You stood in the quiet, watching the soft light of a new dawn touch the scarred hull of the station. The long night was over.